Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the talk show. I am Deborah Rose with Realty One Group in Payson, Arizona. You can visit this show afterwards. It'll be archived on PaysonAZProperties.com. And thank you for joining us today. It's going to be a really interesting show. Not a topic that most people broach, but an extremely important topic. But first off, before we introduce our special guest, I want to say hello to Cameron Davis of Arizona Razor Thin Media, who's behind the camera. Thank you, Cameron and Chaz, for always doing such a great job putting this show on. So please like, share, ask questions if you have any. We'll be happy to answer them for you. And I'm going to introduce Doug Disbrow. He is Arizona Wastewater Services, right? Mm-hmm. He owns a business locally here. Doug, you've lived here for 50 years in Payson, right?
Correct.
Wow. And you have been managing, what does on-site wastewater mean? Because the average person doesn't know what that means.
Simpler term is septic system.
Okay, septic systems.
Yes.
So you've been managing septic systems now for how long in our area?
15 years.
15 years. Wow. It's kind of a really dirty subject, right? I mean, when you're dealing with waste.
It's a necessity.
It's a necessity. Yes, it is.
We all gotta do it.
We do, and there's a lot of people may not think, oh, what a horribly boring subject, but it's really not, because as a realtor, I see all kinds of things, but I can only imagine some of the things that you see. So what is it that you like to let the general public know that is important for them to know about septic systems?
One of the most important things is it's not a flush it and forget it type thing. It requires maintenance. It doesn't matter what type of system it is. There's some type of maintenance required. And you can maintain it, or you can spend a lot of money down the road fixing it.
A lot of money, huh?
A lot.
What can go wrong with the septic system?
So, two areas where we see a lot of problems is the soil, which is the final treatment process, and where the rubber meets the road, basically. It quits absorbing the wastewater, dirty water. And then when it quits absorbing it, it comes to the surface. And when it comes to the surface, now we have, homeowners have a pond of wastewater in their yard. Or it's running down to the neighbor's yard. Their pets are running through it, their kids are running through it, and they bring all that back into the house. And now their house becomes a health hazard.
It is a health hazard. Why? So the soil would fail absorbing it. What happens if that occurs? Where do people turn to get help for that?
So the typical solution to that particular problem is putting in a new disposal area or leach lines, as most people understand them. And that can be challenging sometimes with small properties, finding an area of the yard to do that in. And but so you move your disposal of your wastewater to virgin dirt, and then properly designed and properly maintained system. The ideal is it will last 20 years, and in that 20-year period, the old disposal area gets a chance to rejuvenate. The soil, nature has a way to rejuvenate that on its own. And then when your using wears out, you can move back to the old leach lines from the disposal area. And that's the science, the science.
Yeah.
We're not getting into a lot of specifics, but
so when the sewage makes it to the surface, I mean, how long does it take before people can actually use it? Does it have to be corned off? I mean, is there inspectors that come and?
So yeah, when it comes to the surface, then you have odors. It could could be running off on the neighbor's property, and that's usually at the point that the neighbor's smelling it, the neighbor's seeing it on his property. He calls the local health authority, and then they give it to it. The government gets involved in it. So, and that's a whole lot of hoops and hurdles, and we've got to get it cleaned up. And so then there's a lot, a lot of us in the industry that get involved, from troubleshooters, septic pumpers, and contractors that do the repair or replacement. And the septic tank is just the first part of the process. It's actually the first treatment unit you have. And people don't think of the septic tank as a treatment unit of their wastewater, but it is. Septic tanks are designed to reduce the strength of wastewater by 50% from the time that drop of water comes into the tank to the time that drop of water goes out of the tank. It's 50% cleaner. And then the soil takes care of the rest of the process. And in our part of the country, that can be challenging because we don't have a lot of soil. We have a lot of rock. We have massive clay, a lot of that. And massive clay is a type of soil of high clay content, and it produces very tough challenges into doing that process.
So in that case, I mean, we call that a perk test. When you're buying land or you're thinking about building a home, you have to get the soil perk test in the beginning to determine what the soil can handle, right? And that's what you're talking about.
So the perk test that you're calling it is called a soil test nowadays. It's a soil analysis test. And ideally, we're looking at different horizons of soil down to 12 feet deep, if it can be excavated. The rock shells usually prevent that from happening. So you're looking, there's 15 types of soils in the world. Arizona has 7 of those 15 types.
We're such a cool state.
Yes.
We got it all here.
Yeah, so this is all, and so we know what, from what we find in there, we know what we're going to have to deal with, because our objective is to get you a septic system under proper maintenance and proper usage to last you 20 years. The disposal area to last 20 years. The equipment in front of it can be a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But the disposal area is what we want to see last 20 years or more.
What about the tank then? Because I'm noticing, I've seen a great variance in tank materials, and it seems like the newer tanks are failing a lot sooner than the older tanks fail, because some of the older tanks were made of concrete cast iron, and now we're seeing fiberglass. And the root invasion, that's a big problem, isn't it?
It is. So, just a little bit about tanks. So, tanks used to always be concrete or block. And the early ones were marginally watertight, and they were allowed to leak X amount in a 24-hour period or hour period and still be considered watertight. Then, as codes changed, that's no longer the case. Now they can't leak at all. And there's got to be 0 water droppage in an hour to be a meet the code tank. And this can be tough with concrete. It has to have the right mix. Now, gases are formed in a tank. Methane gas and hydrogen sulfide gas. This deteriorates concrete quickly. And so we do see a lot more concrete tanks fail than we do any other type, but it's mostly due to age and from the era when they were constructed. Concrete tanks today are really good tanks, no doubt about it. They're well built. The problem is it takes a big piece of equipment to set a 10,000-pound tank, and it's got to get within 6 feet of the hole. And a lot of these properties, you can't do that.
That's true.
So we had to have, we go to alternative construction, polypropylene. So for quite a few years, fiberglass was the popular tank to do that, because plastic tanks really hadn't come on the market yet. And just their construction, fiberglass breaks real easy if you get a rock up against it. It's good, and earth is constantly shifting and moving, expanding, contracting, and the tanks expand and contract with water pressure. And so you get a rock pushing on the side of a fiberglass tank, it doesn't take long before it pokes through. Or some of their seams, some of the manufacturers, their seams just weren't that great, and if the bedding of the tank wasn't good enough, it would actually pull that seam apart.
And it takes years. I mean, that could cause the problem of the seepage getting into the soil, but it could go a long time before anyone notices it, which creates another health concern. So I'm just speaking from experience, just being in real estate for 2 decades now. The old inspection reports were 2 pages long. Now it's 10 pages long, and some people get irritated about that. But there's a reason, because if these tanks are failing, the neighbors' health could be affected, and also these properties that are by the river, that's a huge concern. So what are you seeing? Where's the trend going with riverfront properties and tanks that can't qualify or don't have the space to drop a big tank into the ground?
So we'll see that most tanks then go to polypropylene, a form of plastic.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't decay. They're somewhat flexible without breaking. So they provide a better dollar value for the homeowner. When it comes to being by streams and washes and so forth, let's just do streams for instance. The code has setbacks to a stream, and I'm not saying you can't be within that setback, but if you're going to be within that setback, you're going to have to do some type of advanced treatment of your wastewater to make it pretty clean before it goes into the ground, because we know that it's going to hit that rock shelf and move right along that rock shelf and go into the stream. Mm-hmm. That's just proven. So we have to look at that when we replace systems or put in new systems for new builds. And that, of course, technology is expensive. It's just like anything else. Yeah.
It becomes an engineered system, and I think a lot of sellers are mortified when they have had a cabin for 3 or 4 decades and everything's been fine, but when they go to sell it and they're by the river, oftentimes the county will require them to put in an alternative system before they can hand the property over to a new homeowner. Alternative systems are anywhere, from the cost of them? What's the range that you see?
Well, in today's world, you're looking at $35,000 to $45,000. We've had a 43 to 45% price increase since February of this year in our products.
That's really good to know.
And it's tough.
That is
it's tough. Because I can't absorb it. Mm-mm. I'm paying more for stuff right now than what I sold it for in January and February.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
And then this leads to another problem that I want to talk about, because I see it as a realtor, where more and more people want to buy a cabin up here for an Airbnb. And we're going through a situation with Levi. We just finished a situation, I and Levi Brownlee, mm-hmm. who's a lot of people know in this area. And what we're seeing is the buyers are not being educated about the septic tanks. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the most valuable information we could put out there today, because isn't this week like some kind of national septic day? Tell me about that.
So this is National Septic Smart Week. And that was created by the EPA. Uh-huh. And it was designed to help improve the awareness of septic systems. Because most people don't think beyond the lever. And you know which lever I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
On that porcelain throne.
Yes. The flush
They don't
module.
think about it past that unless it winds up in the bathtub or on the floor at your feet.
Oh, that's just such a vivid image. Oh.
But it's the truth.
I know. And
It's the
we
truth.
want people not to experience this horrible nightmare,
It
right, of a
is.
situation.
It's not pretty, and it kind of ruins people's day. Not the way you want to start out your day.
Oh gosh, no.
And so, so Septic Smart Week is set aside, and there's proclamations done by governors and mayors all over the country. And to be honest, it's like we don't have time. But this gives me a little bit of opportunity to share.
Awesome.
So today's subject of the Septic Smart, each day is a different subject, is get your tank pumped, or pump your tank.
This is incredible. We didn't even plan it this way. This
this
is by
just
accident, people, okay?
So why do I have to pump my tank? And it's because there's things that go into your tank that don't break down. Not all of our body waste that goes into the tank breaks down and goes away. And you got to think of your septic system as a living organism, because that's exactly what it is. You got microbes in there that digest our waste, and they can break down and digest paper to a certain extent, and those microbes depend on food, which is our body waste, and oxygen, which comes from the water. So if you have a leaky tank, it doesn't retain the water, so the microbes die. You don't get the biological action going on in the tank. And then, so why do I have to pump it? Because the accumulation of stuff that doesn't break down grows or adds up in a period of time. And as you just kind of give you an idea of how a septic tank works, you have the tank is 4 to 5 feet deep. You have an inlet pipe from the house that will be at 48 inches roughly from the bottom of the tank. You have an outlet pipe to your leach line that should be around 44 inches from the bottom of the tank. You have a little air space in there, and the tank's typically 8 to 10 feet long. So as the water moves through the tank, the heavy stuff is settling to the bottom, and the light stuff flowing to the surface, and in the middle is what we call the clear zone. And newer tanks have a baffle with a 4-inch hole at that clear zone, so the cleanest water of the tank moves through to the next compartment before it goes out into the leach field. This all accumulates over a period of time, and it's different for every household because of how many people live in the house, what their practices are, and so forth. So the rule of thumb, and we can to save you all the math and everything involved in it, but 12 to 14 inches of accumulation in the tank of accumulated waste is when you need to pump the tank. Because you start moving, you lose that settling time in the clear zone, and you start moving higher volumes of solid waste out to your leach field, which is going to plug up the pores of the soil, create a biomat in the soil that will not allow the water to go away.
How can you tell though? I mean, there's no indicator anywhere. Like,
Right.
How are people supposed to know when there's 12 to 14 inches in the bottom of a septic tank? How do you figure that?
So we have tools that allow us to measure that, but we have to gain access to the tank. We have to have access to the tank. And I don't mean a 4-inch pipe. I mean a 20 to 24-inch opening. And most tanks in the last since 1990 will have that size of opening. They'll have 2 of them actually. And your septic pump company, wastewater professionals like myself, we all have the tools to do that, and we can take a fairly accurate reading of what's sitting in the bottom of the tank, and we can measure the stuff, the amount that's floating on the tank. What's floating is grease, oil, fat, raw and cooked or foods that are lighter than water. Toilet paper will typically float, but it will break down and eventually dissolve. In most cases, it depends on the volume of people in the house. So this is all that we're measuring, and these people can do it. And I'm not the only one. I mean, there's gobs of it out there.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't had your tank pumped in years and you're starting to worry about it, call a pumper and ask him to measure it and tell you how much solids are in there when he pumps it. And you can take that and say, okay, well, my target is 12 inches of accumulation. He pumped it. It's been 4 years since we pumped it, and I had 10 inches of solid waste in there, right? Well, that was money well spent, right? Yeah, it was maybe a little bit soon, but maybe I can go 5 years next time if I don't change my practices in the house.
Correct. And so the math that you're talking about is, how big is the tank, how many fixtures are in the home, how much water is going into the tank on a daily basis. That's how you do your science, but which leads us back. If you're living in a normal household full-time on a septic system with, say, a family of 4, they will need to pump that tank at least, every
3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years. When it's an Airbnb, let's talk about that.
So this is where it gets tough, because Airbnbs, the typical renter doesn't even care what he flushes down the toilet, or puts down the drain. And it's not just the people using it, because these Airbnbs have house cleaners that come in after they leave to clean and sanitize the house. And this is something that we've seen major problem I'm starting to see this year, because of our world that we're in. Antibacterial hand soaps have become very popular, especially in Airbnbs. And we're seeing a buildup of that in the septic tanks. And that antibacterial product is killing the biology in the septic tanks. And now the system doesn't work.
That's a problem.
We've got dead bacteria, and bleach kills bacteria. The antibacterial soaps kill it. Now, you wanted the antibacterial hand stuff that you put on and just air dries, evaporates. That doesn't affect, because it evaporates. That's not a huge impact on the septic system, but the soaps are. And laundry soaps. And so the cleaners come in and they grab all the bedding and they do 2, 3, sometimes 4 loads of laundry while they're there cleaning the house. And this creates a huge amount of turbulence in the tank, stirs up the solids, moves it through to the leach field, and now you've got all these solids in your leach field plugging up the pores of the soil. Now, let's move into a lot of the homes that we have in this area are being turned into Airbnbs, are over 20 years old.
That's true.
Many of them are in the 30 to 40-year-old bracket. That's back when there was no knowledge of how to size a system. There was no regulation, no permitting, none of that stuff was done. So it was whatever anybody knew best. All right, well, here's a 500-gallon tank, that'll work, or a 800-gallon tank, that'll work, and I got 10 feet of pipe with holes in it. I'll lay it out here in the dark and throw some rock in it, and I'll be good. That might work. That worked for a lot of years for, Grandma and Grandpa, because they knew how to live on a septic system. Because they grew up on a septic system back on the farm, and they may only been coming up to the property and using it 1 weekend a month for 3 or 4 months out of the year. So that wasn't a huge impact on this little tiny septic system. Now we got Airbnbs coming in, and they're putting 8, 10, 12 people into a 3-bedroom house on a system that was designed for grandma and grandpa, and occasionally their grandkids on a weekend or a week at a time, and they're just coming to the surface left and right. They can't stand the volume of water. I said, we were at one a couple of weeks ago, and the renters were there. We had to come in and do a quick analysis of where the system was, and we were there for 2 hours. The water flow into that septic tank, which turned out to be a 500-gallon septic tank and 28 feet of leach line, was non-stop, and didn't slow down, and it was at the rate of a water spigot wide open.
Oh my gosh.
For 2 hours. That system wasn't designed to take that.
Right.
So
sellers have to be really cognizant of this, and this is a very important part of owning property here, is if you're on a septic system, you have to understand, you have to maintain them, like you said, a living organism. A couple of questions I have in my mind. What do chemotherapy drugs do to septic systems if you're on chemotherapy?
they sterilize it. They kill all the bacteria.
Same thing.
They kill all the bacteria in the tank, and they sterilize the soil.
Okay, so
and by mean sterilize, it kills all the bacteria. All the microbes are dead.
Yeah. What can you put? Is there anything you could put in there to help it? We're kind of like talking about the human colon too. You want to put bifidas and acidophilus and things in.
And as a human, if we have to go on some antibacterial or penicillin or something for an infection or whatever, we've learned that we can take herb or whatever to restart the bacterial growth in our stomachs. So it's important to realize that there's a difference between bacteria and an enzyme. We see commercials all the time that say, put this in your septic tank and never have a problem. That's an enzyme.
Yeah.
All right? And you have to look for actual bacteria that you can add. But I don't recommend adding bacteria or any type of additive just as a routine thing. This is something we use when there's a problem. This is one of our tools. Okay? And you have to know, understand what quantity to use and when to use it. Okay?
Okay.
So,
it's a lot of information, and we're already running out of time, dang it.
You can just stay on chemotherapy, radiation chemotherapy. If you can stay off of your septic system, go live with family that's on a city sewer, you will save yourself a lot of money while you're treating that. So the body's pH goes wacko, and so the pH in the septic system follows it.
Right.
Okay, because all those chemicals are going through the body. When your pH turns back to normal, then it's safe to go back on a septic system.
Okay, good to know. So, for reoccurring do we have to address this at some point, maybe on a legislative basis or changing state laws? Because if a seller that owns an Airbnb is continually violating and not addressing the septic systems, and you guys are going to the rescue a lot more these days because the system is being overused, do you have any remediation to a seller where you could say, hey, if this happens again, we're going to shut this place down because it's a health hazard to the neighbors?
There's nothing regulating it. There's nothing. The only time it'll get brought attention is when a neighbor complains to the local health departments, and then they'll get involved. If correction doesn't occur, they can red tag the house and say you can't occupy it anymore. They have the legal authority to do that. Now, all our codes that we design wastewater systems and dealing with wastewater systems and keeping the wastewater going through the process it's supposed to be comes from the state. Arizona Department of environmental quality, they regulate that part of our world, okay, the wastewater world, all right? They delegate to the counties to enforce those laws. Counties do the best they can with the personnel they got, and most counties don't have a lot of personnel that deal with it. So these things go for some time unattended, but
Interesting. Well, that's a problem that we're going to have to address as a county, as a community, because we're seeing a lot of problems now with the Airbnb. So we just want to wrap this up. Is it just in a basic summary, Doug? What is it? Just bullet point a few things that homeowners should do to maintain their septic system, and if there's a problem, just paraphrase it again if you don't mind, just bullet points what people need to be doing with their septic systems.
well, if you have a conventional septic system, there is maintenance, and contacting a plumber and get some basic information, or a professional get some basic information if you don't know it, will help you a lot, save you money. If you have an advanced treatment system, that means that you got pumps and filters and this and that, all right, that needs to be serviced every year.
Every year.
Every year it needs to be checked by a professional service provider.
Okay.
And just like your car needs to have the oil changed, and you got to put new tires on it sometimes, or brakes. This is not the septic system's not a free ride, no matter what it is. There's maintenance to it. And I would much rather see us take care of this problem on a local basis with good education and homeowner involvement than see government come in and start, you got to do this, you got to do that, you do that. We have our codes, just like the codes of building a house, electrical codes, plumbing codes, all that's done for our own health and personal safety. The wastewater system is even more important.
Yeah.
If you look back in history, whole towns were wiped out by plagues that came from the outhouses and the ponds of wastewater in that around those towns. So we don't want to create that in our neighborhoods. That the financial impact of having diseases running through our neighborhoods and our little towns and communities and into our rivers, I don't think we want it.
Absolutely not. And that's a very, very valid point, and that's why we may have to take more steps in the future to stop this. Airbnbs are basically clerkless hotels, and it's causing a lot of problems. And I'm glad that you came on today and shared your wisdom with people, and I hope that the community will share this video, because this is really important information. You brought up, we're dealing with remnants of COVID, and we don't even think about the septic system. So there's just such an ignorance about them, and we're trying to eliminate the ignorance so people can make better decisions and kind of pay attention a lot more than that maybe they have been. So I want to thank you so much
for
coming on the show. Do you have any information of how people could reach you? If they have an issue, is there a number that they should be calling if they have a problem?
If you like my number, I'll talk to people all the time. So it's area code 928-978-0497.
0497.
Yeah. If I don't answer, it's either because I'm talking to somebody or I'm out in the area where there's no cell service, and there's a lot of that around here.
Oh boy, is there ever.
So leave a message. If I don't call you back in 24 hours, I'm sorry. Try again, because when we're in no cell range, the message doesn't come in for 2 or 3 days.
That is true, and people don't believe it. It's like, it happens to me too, and then they get mad. It's like, well, I was out at cell phone range, and 5 days later, bloop, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they sent this 5 days ago.
Yeah.
It's a real problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, but anyways, it's wonderful that people have a resource in you, and thank you for being in an industry that's kind of poopy, I guess is the right word, right? And
it's not glamorous, but at the end of the day, you're usually somebody's hero.
Well, thank you for being our local septic hero. Thank you for joining the show. I want to thank everyone for joining us. You can see this show archived again on paceandazproperties.com next week on the talk show link. So we look forward to seeing you next month. Have a great day.